Hello. Well, I don't think any of us thought that 2025 would be the year that we'd have to pull out our periodic table of elements for a geopolitical discussion, but here we are. Obviously, rare earth elements have gone to the highest levels of political discussion in our nation. As we all know, critical minerals are important for everything we have in modern life. It's important also for our national security. They've now increasingly been used as a geopolitical tool, and the US is very dependent on certain areas of the world for specific critical minerals, and particularly the processing. At the same time, with this great need for more production, both at the mining and processing level, we have massive underinvestment in this. Part of that underinvestment is caused by greater fluctuations in these particular critical minerals prices because of the market role that Chinese players have in this. They often act as monopolists in that area. I'm part of leading a group that's funded by the Department of Defense called the Critical Minerals Forum to work with miners, processors, and US manufacturers to get better access to critical minerals from all parts of the globe and from the United States. My great panel today has a lot of experience in this field, both in the mining area and in the diplomacy area. So I'm going to start with my first question with Atanas. We're seeing massive increases in the need for critical minerals. It's estimated that in the next 25 years, we're going to need to mine more copper than we have in all of human history. And that's going to require about $2 trillion of new investment. So just can you explain it from a problem set, why we are seeing such increases in demand for these critical minerals?
Thank you, Rob. Just a quick introduction. I'm Atanas Bostandijev, founder of GemCorp Capital. We are an investment firm focusing on emerging markets, and we specialize in providing specific growth capital, equity, and debt solutions for our clients in the global south, from Africa, Middle East, Latin America, and Southeast Asia. And to come back to your question, the current demand or growth in demand in critical minerals is driven by kind of four factors that we know. One is electrification and EVs, clean energy, defense, and AI and data centers. And we know that all these factors require enormous amounts of critical minerals in order for them to happen, to materialize. But over the last 3 to 4 years, since the increase of geopolitical tensions globally, defense actually became a critical driver with G7, G20 defense budgets basically being doubled to tripled, which means that whatever demand curves we were projecting for critical minerals 3, 4 years ago, now you put a multiple on that, right? 2, 3, 4, 5 times. And the question is exactly where are those minerals going to come from? And the majority of the minerals are in the global south. Africa controls 30-40% of the critical mineral stack. And we all know that this whole area has been massively underinvested over the last decades. And in order for the West, in order to start kind of even competing with our Chinese colleagues, we need to be much faster and smarter in providing capital, flexible capital, towards those destinations, towards those critical mineral projects, right? Because we all know where they are. There have been a lot of studies done 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. So we know where the minerals are. But the elephant in the room is, how are you really going to develop those without the capital? And we as a financier, we are facing that problem every day, because when you go to US or Western institutional investors or developmental institutions, and when people hear that, look, we're going to invest in a mine in Congo or in Zimbabwe, and people run out of the room. Whereas if you're a Chinese player, it's a given already, they're there. So I think the first challenge we need to fix is kind of the general acceptance. Almost it needs to be a policy implemented by the Western financial institution, just like we made made it okay to invest in green hydrogen or other type of green projects, even though their economic viability is questionable, it should be okay for us to invest in critical minerals in the global south. And I think that's the starting point.
And really to encourage it, to really push it even
Absolutely.
harder as we saw for environment and
Absolutely.
sustainability projects. So Jyothish, I want to pick up on, people that may not be as familiar with this. There's a whole value chain here. It includes not just mining, but the processing level. So if you could just give us a sentence or two about your background, what Glencore, what role it plays, and how we can develop more processing that goes with the mining that will then be delivered to our manufacturers.
Okay, so I'm Jyothish George. I run metals and marketing at Glencore. Glencore is a large commodity producer, and we're also a large trader of critical minerals or commodities. So it makes us a little bit of a unique company in the sense that most companies are either large producers or large traders. We do both. We have operations around the world, and increasingly what we find is in some of the countries where we operate in, we are the only Western company left. So like DRC is a good example. Practically speaking, we are the only Western company left there. And it's to do with multiple factors. Some of it is, operating in some of these jurisdictions is difficult. And traditionally, when these ESG scores came, some of the large producers decided the best way to get better scores is to not operate in difficult jurisdictions. So they pulled out of some of these jurisdictions. Then in terms of processing, there used to be this idea that you process where it's cheapest. And that idea worked till maybe about 10 years ago. COVID was the first shock to this idea that if you just process everything where it's cheapest to process, you might have a problem because the supply chains broke down. And then increasingly over the last 4 or 5 years, you've seen with geopolitical risk, every country is now interested in resource security. The problem is everyone says they're interested in resource security, but they don't want to pay for it. Because the reality is if you want to process if you want processing to come to the US, it won't be the cheapest processing. So somebody needs to pay for it somehow. And it's not just CapEx. Even OpEx-wise, it'll be, on an operating basis, it won't make money if you have to sell at prices where somebody else who makes the cheapest product sells. So it's a increasingly global challenge, and it's something that needs a lot of institutions to work together, and also the central problem of who pays for it needs to be solved.
Great point. Well, lucky for all of us, we have someone on the panel who knows a lot about how to work globally to get companies back into markets, to de-risk those from the perspective of the geopolitics, to get in arrangements where we have good environmental conditions, good labor practices, and ethical sourcing that benefits the local population of those countries. So Congressman Young Kim, you're on the Foreign Relations Committee, Foreign Affairs Committee in the House, you're in the Financial Services Committee, and you're on the China Strategic Committee. So you have a perspective on these issues that both is into the geopolitics of why it's important for the United States, but also in the nitty-gritty of how to do it, and also on the financial incentives to get it done. But I guess I packed a lot in there, but the real question is, how should the United States be looking at developing the partnerships that set those preconditions to de-risk projects for these companies?
Well, first of all, I'm really glad to be here on this panel with some experts and someone who is willing to invest and use the private capitals here. To answer your question, I want to say there are in 3 ways. One, we need a clear strategy, clear agenda that benefits both partners and allies. After surviving 36 nonstop grilling Foreign Affairs Committee markup just last week, we passed the bill that will authorize the Bureau of Energy Security and the Diplomacy, which will create a separate entity to address some of the questions that you're asking. How do we lessen or reduce the American dependency on our adversaries like China and others? And then 2, how do we increase the supply chain issues that we have, and how do we support our US private sector investments so that they can do more overseas? That is really something that I'm really excited that we were able to pass that out of the committee. Secondly, we also have a tool the U.S. Development Finance Committee, Finance Corporation, has to be reauthorized before October 6th deadline. And it was also included, and we got that marked up. And traditionally, DFC has been used for development-focused projects. What we're trying to do in Congress is to expand the opportunity for American private sector to expand beyond the development projects into the projects that will meet our critical needs of meeting the national security. And that is developing in the critical mineral supply, processing, and mining those areas. And then lastly, just quickly, I want to talk about another existing tool that is Mineral Security Partnership. We already have that, but we are trying to expand the countries beyond the 14 plus EU. So we can strategize on how we get more countries to join us. And that would be a real clear solution. But let me quickly talk about US-Ukraine minerals deal. That is a DFC project. That's a win-win.
$75 million that the U.S. announced last week that they're putting into this reconstruction fund in Ukraine, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Total of 150 million.
Yep.
Each side paying that. Yes.
Well, thank you for your efforts to get the Development Finance Corporation reauthorized and improve its authorization to go to higher income countries as well. Atanas and Jyothish, we were talking a little bit earlier about these government tools, the Export-Import Bank, DFC, and we were just talking about pushing companies to invest in this area or giving them encouragement to do so. But it often comes down to companies on the risk side. So projects need to be de-risked, and then government can help bring down that risk by partially showing their skin in the game on this. But you both have history and knowledge of investing in these areas. So what do you still think is if you were kind of running those organizations, what would you like to see facilitate the private sector investment that you're very close to help get these projects de-risked in Africa or other places that you're looking at?
Very, very good question. And I think there's a number of tools that can be used. And I would say first is partnerships. Creating a partnership on the private and kind of government level here in the US or Europe, but also create partnership locally in the countries where you invest, be it Africa, be it Indonesia or Latin America, because you need to have partners on the ground that understand how to walk the walk. And then from financial structuring perspective, again, there is other tools to de-risk a certain investment. For example, the private side could take a first loss or equity type of exposure where private capital actually is deployed, and obviously you get a higher return for that. Whereas the government, DFC or other type of institutions, they could kind of ensure the senior investment piece, which could make the type of investment more de-risked for institutional investors. Because I think the elephant in the room here is we need to drive institutional capital in this. Without that institutional capital, with all due respect for 75 or 150 million for Ukraine fund, it's nothing. We need here to deploy tens of billions of dollars over the next 5 to 10 years, right? And I think this type of private and government partnerships, especially from a US DFC or IFC perspective, coupled with European Investment Fund or Middle Eastern funds, that's got to be the starting point. And I think we are not talking here that the capital is going to be deployed towards uneconomical projects. Me sitting here as an investor, I think this is one of the most exciting actually investment stories out there, because A, you are developing materials where you're going to have increasing demand over the next 10, 20 years, driven by the factors that we mentioned earlier. Number two, you are creating also investing in infrastructure locally, because just investing in the mine doesn't get you anywhere. You need to invest in energy, because the mine without energy doesn't work. And then you need to invest in logistics. So the roads, the railroad, et cetera, et cetera. So when you actually invest, you create a whole ecosystem, right? And such type of opportunities you don't get to see very often in the developed markets where we are. So if we couple that with the strategic angle, with an off-take angle, let's say from the Western governments to support the increased demand, you have a very solid, actually, investment case.
Right. Thanks. Jyothish, just to add on to that, the only other feature
Yeah,
I want to see if you bring in is sustainability. Is it possible to make these projects more environmentally friendly than they're done in other parts of the
Yeah,
world?
they are. I think I have a slight difference of opinion. I think the need for government funding or institutions like DFC, etc., is because not all projects will look economically viable when you look at it. So if you strategically want certain objectives, you need to be willing to pay for it and take risk for it. What we found previously was there was a lot of people willing to fund something. So the government agencies say, we will fund it if you can prove to us that it is de-risked and the economic returns are good. And the point is, if it's de-risked and the economic returns are good, then we don't need funding from someone else. We can do it ourselves. So the reason we want funding is because we're saying it is not economic to do this, but it looks like it's important for you that someone does this, then you need to be willing to fund it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, in that area, the Export-Import Bank has been somewhat handicapped by having a 2% default rate, maximum rate. So I believe, Congresswoman Kim, you're the sponsor of a bill in the Financial Services Committee that would raise that cap for projects that are deemed strategically important. So
Well,
no longer
okay.
meet that 2% cap.
Yes.
So then the further question I really want to ask you about was, really high level. This administration's been very focused, the Trump administration, on doing deals on assertion of economic interest for the United States globally. What is the role that, as an oversight committee, the oversight committee for the State Department, do you think State Department and its many foreign service officers and the commercial advocates on the ground in those countries and the tool of economic statecraft, which is usually subordinate to the bigger geopolitical decisions about military force and conflicts around the world, which have to be on the front burner, it usually sits behind that. But how important is that for U.S. success in the future?
Well, for the United States to succeed and support our U.S. investments and protect their investments overseas and help them gain more market access abroad, it's critically important that we strengthen the economic statecraft. It's not just easy just to say economic statecraft or economic policy is national policy or energy policy is national policy. We need to really follow through with it, which is why I was able to really focus on making sure that our foreign service officers or the commercial service, we need to bring it back to the State Department. And oftentimes they are working in silo. So they are not given the diplomatic tool to be able to negotiate and help our American businesses abroad, gaining that market access. So that is something that I'm working on. That was not quite included in the markup we did last week, but we will address it. I got the commitment that we're going to do it through the Foreign Service Act that is coming up. So I haven't forgotten, and we need to make sure that economic statecraft is strong.
That's great. Great message. Sometimes legislating incrementally is the way to get things done in the end, taking one piece at a time. And after 36 hours of debate on one bill, I can understand how there's only so much that we can move at a time.
But in order to help the businesses and protect the capital, what we need in the long term is to ensure that we reform our permitting processes too. Look at MP Materials, for example, in Mountain View and San Bernardino County in the state of California. I had the opportunity to visit. I mean, it took them about 6 years just to get the permit approved, just to start the processing. I mean, if we are ready to do this, again, we have the opportunity to mine it, but we need to be able to process it here and eventually get it down to the downstream and start manufacturing. So,
great.
My 2 cents.
I see we're almost out of time, so I just want to do a lightning round just at the end. Just one aspect of minerals and mining for the kind of general audience that is not recognized, that people don't understand, that when you talk about minerals and mining, that you think people don't quite understand. I mean, we've covered a bit of this already about the investment side, but is there something else that you think that really the audience would benefit from knowing?
That's a difficult question. I think it's not a new industry, right? It's been forever. I think with the development of technology that we're seeing nowadays, actually, you could really optimize, increase efficiencies, and really structure very elegantly those critical supply chains, and not only provide the materials that's needed here in the West, but also, very importantly, you're making a huge impact to the local communities where those minerals are, because ultimately it's again going back to partnerships. And if people in those countries in the global South see that we're investing there, we're providing them with water, with schooling, with healthcare, with a future for their families, they become our future allies, right? And I think it's not just economics; it's also human, and I think that is so critical about it.
So technology and the benefit to people. Jyothish.
I think, people don't realize that minerals are essential for all the cool stuff people talk about.
Yep.
Whether it's AI or going to space or, the cell phones, etc. There is not enough interest in actually generating those minerals. So we're losing out the new generation. The new generation is not interested in studying mineralogy or metals and mining. And we need that. Without that, none of this will happen.
Yep. Congresswoman, you just raised permitting. Is there anything else that you really think we haven't talked about today?
I mean, my subcommittee had a hearing, and I've been having roundtables with the stakeholders. We need to work together to break that choke point that China has on critical mineral supply chain. It's safer, it's cleaner. We have the ability to do it. We just need to make sure that we reform the permitting process so we can do it right here.
Great. Wonderful to have someone like you in the Congress. Please join me in thanking our panel for these great thoughts.
Thank you.